become love matches, and these more fortunate members do begin to care about one another over time. However, these married couples often begin to feel that it is best to hide their positive feelings, including their sexual feelings, while in the cult. True affection between members can be perceived as a threat to the power of the cult leader, who may attempt to break up successful relationships. Occasionally, when real intimacy between partners occurs, or when members have been able to voluntarily choose one another, the members are able to share their observations of their cult experience with one another in a way that eventually propels them out of the cult. However, generally, there are tremendous strain on these more successful cult relationships. The cult leader often will manipulate the cult couple in order to increase conflict within the marital relationship. He or she typically will interfere with the couple by separating the pair physically or through emotional manipulations, such as causing each to suspect or see the worst in the other, or by demanding that one of the partners have sex with him or another cult member. These cultic actions have implications for the post-cult relationship of the couple. For example, sex with the leader, known or unknown to the spouse, interferes with the post-cult sexual relationship. The sexually abused member might have difficulty re-experiencing sexual feelings that needed to be numb during the cult abuse. Or if sex with the cult leader was hidden from the spouse, the sexually abused member often is filled with guilt and struggles with the decision about whether or not to disclose the abuse to the spouse. If disclosed, the spouse who receives this information might have a difficult time accepting that this behavior resulted from cult manipulation. I worked with a case in which the cult leader was the biological father of the cult member's child. The former member decided to share this cult secret with her husband and now adult son. They had been in the cult for over 20 years. Although it brought her some degree of relief to be able to share this, it was a painful process for the entire family. Manipulative tactics also can be used on those members who are married prior to their cult experience. If one partner enters the cult, the marital relationship might be destroyed by the cult leader, who begins to demonize the partner who resists cult membership. Occasionally, one partner follows another into the cult and has difficulty adjusting to cult demands, and therefore that member is either expelled or leaves voluntarily. Divorce often follows. Even when both partners are successfully recruited, pre-cult marriages often are destroyed, and it usually is a reflection of the strength of the pre-cult marriage and or the couple's ability to tolerate discomfort when individuals remain together. The cult leader may interfere with the couple's authority as parents to their own children. In a large number of cults, children are instructed to address parents by their first names and only address the cult leader as mother or father. Therefore, the parental role is reduced to that of a sibling to his or her children. Parents often are made to feel selfish if they wish to have a special claim on their own children. In one cult, members were told parents have murderous feelings towards their children, or in another cult, elders can pollute the young. Sometimes through hypnosis or other group pressure techniques, members are encouraged to falsely remember physical or sexual abuse by their parents. These suggestions are an effective way to separate the groups from their parents and to separate cult parents from their own children. In many of these cases, cult members are led to believe that spending less time with their children is for their children's benefit. The cult leader often determines how cult recruits should parent their children, and often will demand that parents abuse or neglect their children. In contrast to this, children of the cult leader often are treated as royalty. Cult members serve as maids, babysitters, gardeners, cooks, chauffeurs, and bodyguards to the royal family. However, because the cult leader's inability to feel empathy towards his own children or her own children, or lacks a desire to spend much time with them, several of these children have described feeling quite distant from their cult leader parent. Children often are not allowed to act in childishly disruptive ways in the cults, and corporal punishment is a common practice. For example, a cult leader in a Bible-based cult used Bible passages to justify his attacks on a cult member for attempting to respond to her baby's cries of hunger. He demanded that she only feed the baby according to the cult leader's whims. This young woman, who left the cult when her child was 1 year old, was filled with guilt for giving in to these attacks and not simply responding to her child's need. Her child was dramatically malnourished. However, when she had been terrified to go against what she had come to believe was the voice of God, been terrified to go against what she had come to believe was the voice of God. It is not unheard of for the cult leader to sexually abuse the child or encourage the parents to do so. Cult leaders often discourage parents from involvement with their children. This usually is due to the cult leader's narcissistic need to be the most important relationship for all the followers. Furthermore, the parents' involvement with their children detracts from the cult business of fundraising and recruitment. Parents may be separated from their children and have to spend long periods of time involved in cult activities. Children might be placed in dormitories or sent away to cult-related boarding schools. Often the members who are in charge of those schools have no training in cult education and no understanding of the emotional needs of children. Upon leaving the cult, parents can begin to allow themselves to empathize with their children. As mentioned previously, empathy was discouraged by the cult leader. Of course, there are some situations where a parent's connection with his or her child helped promote the decision to leave the cult. For example, one woman living on the East Coast left her cult rather than allow the 5-year-old daughter to leave home to attend a cult boarding school on the West Coast, as demanded by the cult leader. Presently, many of the grown children of that cult are suing the organization. They report that they were victims of physical and sexual abuse that took place at those schools. However, parents also have described moments of loving behavior shown towards their children, which often occur in secret defiance of the cult leader. For example, one woman would take her children into an adjacent room and pretend to be hitting them when they fidgeted during prayer meetings. This punishment was prescribed for unruly children. She was fearful of getting caught, but could not bring herself to hit her young children for squirming in their seats during the leader's lengthy sermons. Former cultists sometimes have difficulty taking a parental or authority role after they leave the cult, because, as mentioned previously, only the cult leader had authority and members were placed in the role of big brothers and sisters to their children. These parents often fear that assuming authority will make them appear to be as domineering as the cult leader was. They also may have difficulty assuming authority as a result of their guilt about having neglected or abused their children while in the cult. This fear often results in their difficulty in limiting their children. And other parents continue to hold on to the punitive or sexually stimulating child-rearing practices of the cult, particularly if this was an extension of their own childhood experiences, and they can rationalize these experiences as having been for their own good. Some parents continue to be neglectful of their children. Furthermore, as they are flooded with all the difficulties of leaving a cult and re-entry into the larger culture, the couple might be preoccupied with their own concerns rather than their children's, and not unlike some couples who are going through a difficult divorce, as often happens in those cases. After leaving the cult, the unfreezing of the cultic personality in post-cult life can have a dramatic impact on the marital pair. In the cult, recruits were unknowingly manipulated to suppress their individual reactions, conform to the group, and ultimately develop a new cultic personality. This personality was sustained by a tightly controlled system of rewards and punishments within the cult environment. However, when they leave the cult environment, former cultists start to recover their pre-cult personalities. Slowly, former cultists might discover their partners are unfamiliar to them in many ways, and the complementarity of the cult relationship might begin to fall apart as each of them, or one of them, begins to feel more authentic attitudes and emotions rather than those imposed by the cult. For example, it is common for former members to struggle with identifications made with an abusive cult leader. They may begin to feel shame about their actions to their spouse while in the cult. However, their spouse might feel resentful for that behavior and feel angry towards them, about behavior that they had accepted while they were in the cult. Since all former members are recovering suppressed aspects of their pre-cult personalities during the recovery process, even former cultists who start new relationships soon after their cult experience might begin to mystify their partners. Both the former cultist and the non-cult partner need to recognize that the former cultist will be going through a dramatic period of change in which he or she will be shedding much of his or her cult self and reviving his or her pre-cult personality, which was submerged but not extinguished in the group. One non-cult partner said in bafflement, "I thought I had become involved with a quiet, gentle, religious person. She suddenly becomes a powerhouse who is questioning whether there is a God." There have been several examples of a cult member having been rescued out of a cult by someone outside. They, at work or in some other place, they meet someone on the outside who gets very taken with them, and they get very taken with that person, and a romantic relationship ensues. At that point, often, the non-cult person is able to have the force to help that person out of the cult, and there's a dramatic rescue out. So there's a period of time where that rescuing partner is idealized by the former cultist. But after a while, this starts to break down and fall apart, this idealization, as they're starting to live together. And I'll talk more about why that might happen later in the paper. Furthermore, although married ex-cultists may be sharing the same post-cult difficulties, each of them is handling these difficulties in a unique way, depending on their pre-cult personality structures, the degree of support they receive from others, and the influence of their individual cult experiences. Therefore, as their pre-cult personalities emerge, the complementarity of a marriage based on cult values might begin to crumble as both partners are beginning to establish their unique ways of viewing the world and individual value systems. Needless to say, this places a strain on post-cult marriages. Now I'm going to talk about the destructive dynamics that are inherent in post-cult marriages. As mentioned previously, former cultists have made many identifications with their cult leader. These identifications have supplanted previous identifications made with parental figures early in life. Since cult leaders generally are paranoid individuals, they indoctrinate their members into a paranoid vision of the world. That is, cult leaders tend to ascribe the worst motives to other people's behaviors. When individuals leave the cult, they may continue to have paranoid feelings. In part, this attitude serves them well. At a time that their identity is so fragile, this attitude protects them from being unduly influenced by others. Also, former cult members often tended to be too trusting prior to the cult, and their trusting nature made them more vulnerable to the cult recruitment. However, in marital relationships, this paranoia can be destructive. When an individual who has been in a cult starts a relationship with someone with no prior cult involvement, the former cultists might interpret their partner's behavior suspiciously or see negative motives behind their partner's behavior. When two former cultists are in a relationship, this situation can intensify. Let me give you an example of this. If Judy arrives late for dinner at a restaurant because she was caught in a traffic jam, John might not accept this excuse at face value. John might consider that Judy did not really want to have dinner with him, that Judy is angry at him, or that Judy is being manipulative in some manner. John might see negative motives behind Judy's lateness, either because the cultist trained him to look at behavior in this way, or because the cultist decreased his self-esteem to such a degree that it's hard for him to believe that Judy really wants to spend dinner with him. If John does not share his feelings with Judy, the Judy who is never in a cult might be annoyed that John is so suspicious and might decide that it is not worth having a relationship with such a paranoid individual. In contrast to this, if John is fortunate, Judy might begin to express how much she cares for John and that she really was looking forward to dinner with him. However, if Judy also is a former cult member, it might be hard for her to show her positive feelings towards John. As mentioned previously in the cult, it was dangerous to show romantically positive feelings to other members. Furthermore, Judy might respond to John's suggestion and begin to consider there was in fact a negative motive behind her lateness, such as she created the situation. Additionally, if Judy also has low self-esteem following years of cult mistreatment, she might believe that John's suspicions actually were generated from his dislike of her or her own wish to control or manipulate him. I hope that you could follow me. But there are so many loops that undermine the potential for good things happening in a relationship in these situations. The marital relationship typically provides a place in which the internal conflicts of each partner can be externalized and made accessible in the interaction the couple develops between them. Many therapists who work with couples are aware of several concepts that operate within all marital pairs. These concepts include transference and projection. I'm going to focus on these two concepts. The concept of transference operates in all important relationships, but is particularly relevant to the interaction of couples. This dynamic has been defined by the APA's book on terms and concepts as meaning the displacement of patterns of feeling, thoughts, and behavior originally experienced in relationship to significant figures during childhood onto a person involved in a current interpersonal relationship. So what that means is that we take feelings mostly that we had towards our parental figures early in life, and we're apt to put those feelings on other relationships. And this particularly goes on in intense relationships, like a marital relationship. Those working with couples become aware that at times each partner views the other as a significant figure from early life, most typically a parental figure. However, in working with those who have left a cultic situation, partners often begin to view each other in the way they view the cult leader. This is particularly true for those who've spent long periods of time in cults. For example, Rob had grown up in a house with a mother who he experienced as caring but somewhat intrusive, very talkative and boring. He dealt with her by making his room, many mothers are like that, maybe myself. He dealt with her by making his room into a fortress, and he escaped for hours into the world of books. While at college, he became attracted to an esoteric cult, which satisfied his need to intellectualize and to develop friendships. In the cult, his ability to intellectualize and distance himself served him well, in that he eventually was able to remove himself from the increasing demands of the cult leader and lead after 10 years. When he married another former member of his cult, he began to experience her in the malignant, self-serving manner of the cult leader than simply as the intrusive but generally benign manner of his mother. He would hide his thoughts and feelings from his wife because he expected her to rip them to shreds, as he said, in the manner of his cult leader. Although his wife often pursued him when he became aloof or secretive, and sometimes related to or reacted to him with anger, she did not seem particularly interested in cutting him down. Therefore, in addition to identifying the cult leader's paranoia, former members often unconsciously place others, particularly marital partners, in the role of the malignant cult leader. Former cultists often fear that their present partner is out to use them as they felt used in the cult. A cult leader might tell his or her followers that they were loved, but this was a hollow word used by a narcissistic and/or an antisocial individual who lacked a true capacity to love or feel concern for another human being. Additionally, as mentioned previously, the connection between love and sex was destroyed by the cult leader, and it is hard for former members to begin to link the two. This is particularly true for those who are sexually abused in cults. As a coping mechanism within the cult, many sexually abused individuals learn to dissociate from their feelings during sex, and after the cult, it is difficult to respond to their partner's sexual interest with sexual desire of their own. Also, former cultists might withhold sharing vulnerable feelings with their partner because of a fear of that this admission will be used against them. They can experience their partners as powerful individuals who are out to crush them after years of being exploited and or humiliated by their cult leader. Many former cultists also rely on the defense of projection. Projection is defined as a mental process whereby a painful impulse or idea is attributed to the external world. That is, if there is a conflict about certain feelings, those feelings experienced but forbidden often are projected onto the marital partner. Furthermore, after years of submerging their own needs at the behest of their cult leader, former cultists often experience themselves as deprived individuals. The cult leader made them feel as if they were selfish for any expression of self-interest. The cult leader's attitude that a cult member should have no self-interest typically is transferred onto the marital partner. Former cultists begin to believe that their partner does not want them to have pleasure in life, or that their partner is unwilling to consider their desires. In part, this also is a projection of their own conflicts about the enjoyment of pleasure after a cult. They believe that they want pleasure, but it is forbidden for them it was forbidden in them for so long in the cult that they unconsciously placed their discomfort about their desires onto someone else. In effect, they think, although I want pleasure, he or she does not want me to be pleased. Although a projection occurs within most marriages, it is particularly apparent within marriages in which the boundaries between individuals and their partners are weak. Former cultists who have such a fragile sense of their own identity after the cult are particularly prone to this phenomenon. Furthermore, because of the regression and the resulting establishment of a new identity that occurs within the cult experience, the former member becomes alienated from his or her original parental figures and identifications and begins to experience the cult leader as his or her replacement parental figure. Therefore, the way the cult leader is experienced is commonly projected onto the marital partner, and because the partner also might be making identifications with the cult leader, such as acting arrogant or cold, the projected feelings intensify in the marital pair. If we return to Rob and his wife, we can see projection occurring and intensifying if he becomes so guarded about sharing his thoughts that she angrily might find herself pushing him for information and therefore becoming more and more intrusive. This dynamic actively makes an inner reality, Rob's inner reality, played out by one's partner as defined by something that is often called also projective identification, but I don't really have to get into that in this paper. But I'm going to move on to the case example. Andrew and Barbara came for therapy following over 20 years in a therapy cult. The cult had disbanded after the cult leader died of complications of old age. They had been out of their cult for 7 years, but marital problems had persisted. Although they understood that they had been in a cult, they had not entered into any kind of exit counseling. They also had not read any articles or books on cults or gone to any conferences. I was aware of feeling a special affinity for this couple because they had entered therapy when they were in their 20s, as I had for many of the same reasons. However, instead of being referred to a therapist who had helped them understand themselves in a way that facilitated their self-development, as mine had done, they both were referred to therapists who were part of a cult, and therefore their initial difficulties were exacerbated. In our first meeting, Barbara and Andrew explained that they had married in order to have a child. In their cult, members were discouraged from conceiving children. Only the leaders were free to be parents. Therefore, upon leaving, many of the female members either married to conceive or adopted children on their own. Since Barbara was in her 40s and unable to conceive, they adopted a little girl from China. I asked how they decided to choose one another. Thank you. They described choosing each other because they basically had always liked one another. However, they reassured me that they clearly saw their marriage as a business contract, although they had dated while in the cult. In this cult, arranging to meet for sex was defined as dating. Their cult encouraged sexual intercourse with a new partner nightly as a means of discouraging romantic ties. Barbara explained that continual sexual experiences with multiple partners with whom one felt no attachment had a numbing effect that would often persisted after she exited the cult history. As I was being pulled in to feel a common bond with them, I also experienced them as being very similar to one another. I wanted to know more about each of them as individuals. I also wanted them to begin to recover their past, which had been severed by the cult. Therefore, I asked about their histories. Barbara had grown up in a working-class family in a city in New Jersey. Her father was a truck driver and her mother was a housewife. She had one younger sister. At first, she described her parents, who were both dead, in very disparaging terms. Her father was a ne'er-do-well who was away from home quite a lot, and her mother was, according to her, an hysterical depressive. I wasn't really clear what that meant. I remarked that she probably had a difficult childhood, but the cult most likely had encouraged her to remember the worst aspects of both of her parents. I questioned how she had seen them prior to cult therapy. Barbara began describing them as basically well-meaning but somewhat inadequate. Although her father was not financially successful, he had been a hard-working man. Although her mother periodically became severely depressed, Her mother's sister had been a warm presence and a positive role model in her life. I hoped that Barbara would begin to see her family in a more complex and human way than the rather negative, condescending, and stereotypical manner defined by the cult. Barbara, a shy child, had escaped into books and schoolwork and became an outstanding student. She received a scholarship to a local college and had commuted from home. Then she received a scholarship to graduate school in New York City for a doctorate in art history. She separated from home for the first time to live in an apartment of her own. She received high marks in her classes, but found herself to be intimidated by and less sophisticated than her classmates. She felt lonely and decided to enter therapy to aid her in this transition. Unfortunately, she was referred to a cult therapist. Andrew grew up in Connecticut in an upper-middle-class home. His father was an attorney and his mother was a housewife. He was an only child. His mother died after a lengthy bout with cancer while he was away at college. Andrew also described his parents in highly negative terms. His father was cold and aloof, while his mother was an angry, critical woman. After he left the cult and resumed a relationship with his father, Andrew was amazed at how fun-loving and generous his father could be. He initially attributed this change of behavior to his father's second wife. However, in therapy, he began to consider that although his father's second wife might have influenced his father's behavior, his father also might have been more fun-loving than Andrew remembered, particularly prior to his mother's illness. Although he described his mother in highly negative terms, he admitted that her death from cancer while he was away at college was very sad for him. I also pointed out that her physical and emotional pain from years of cancer might have had a negative effect on her personality. After college, he worked for a publishing company in New York. He happened to rent an apartment with people who were in a cult. Since he was also trying to establish relationships in a new city, with their encouragement, he began to go to cult events. In short time, he began therapy with cult therapists. When this bright, talented couple came to see me, they both were feeling unhappy and generally dissatisfied with their lives. Although Barbara had been able to finish her doctorate, she spent the last 15 years, I have 5 minutes, of her cult experience working as a computer programmer. Andrew, who dreamed of becoming a writer, also was working as a computer programmer. Barbara wanted to return to art history but lacked the confidence. Andrew felt locked into a programming job because he felt he was doing so well financially. Over the 7 years of their marriage, Barbara and Andrew continued having a problem sharing romantic feelings with one another. In the cult, displays of affection had been forbidden, and they had learned to hide their interest in one another. Both experienced revealing affection as too risky or making them too vulnerable. In therapy, we began to explore the meaning of this, and it soon became apparent that each saw the other as the enemy, ready to attack any revelation of authentic or vulnerable feelings. Furthermore, they saw their partner as highly critical, controlling, and depriving. For example, Andrew felt that Barbara resented the time he spent bicycling and seeing his old college friends. Barbara believed that Andrew resented her consideration of a job in the art field. My first task was to help them see how the attitudes they had formulated in the cult were still permeating their present lives, in their transference reactions and projections. I needed to help them become consciously aware of these unconscious processes. Since they were uninterested in attending conferences or programs for former cultists or seeing an exit counselor, I believed that my initial purpose was to help them gain a better understanding of the mind control processes of their group. I know I have a short amount of time, so, I really started with education, as we talked about Friday night, cult education, giving them books, getting them in touch with other people. And what that really did was all the shame about being stupid, how could they have done that, it really cut down on those feelings for them. The other thing that I did with them is that I focused with them on their personality. What were they like prior to their cult experience? And we spent a lot of time talking about who they were to try to help them get in touch with the former selves that they were before they were in the cult. And Barbara's love of art history, and Andrew's love of writing. And with that, each of them moved more in those directions, career-wise. And I also was aware of their feelings about their relationship with me. They were feeling, a lot of trepidation about seeing me as a therapist after being with a cult therapist. And I made it clear to them that I saw this as a collaborative effort, that I wasn't an expert, that they could get information from a lot of sources, not just me, that they were the experts about themselves. And the three of us working together will figure out how to make things better for them. I also was more self-disclosing than I would normally be, and that came through. And when they asked me how I got involved in this field, I shared with them that my younger brother had gotten involved in the cult, and also my feelings that I had been a political activist in my late teens, early 20s, and I joined a lot of groups, and any of those could have been cults. So I saw myself as someone that could be very likely be in their shoes. And I talked about how I admired their courage in being brave enough to come to see me as a therapist after the abuse that they had suffered at the hands of cult therapists. And I also said that I was, felt very optimistic about their future, and once they came to understand all that happened to them, because they were feeling very pessimistic about their lives after all those years in the cult. And I felt that each of them had a lot of potential. They showed a lot of potential prior to being in the cult, and they continue to show a lot of potential in their work with me. And then I really focused on how the cult mind control and the transference reactions and the projections that we're having towards one another were constantly interfering, in their relationship with one another. I saw them as basically well suited for one another, and we talked, I kind of didn't buy the business aspect of their relationship, and I talked with them about that. Was that really the only reason? And they admitted to me a secret that they had while they were in the cult. The two of them had gone away for a weekend to Vermont, and this was a secret from the cult, and they had gone to a motel, and they had wild sex, and they had a great time together while they were in the cult. And then the two of them, time is up. But anyway,